I mentioned a few days ago that letters like 1 Corinthians are one side of a two-sided conversation. And most of the time, we have to make educated guesses about what Paul is referring to in parts of his letters. The correspondents themselves are both familiar with the ongoing conversation, so they don't usually have to retell everything. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is a bit of an exception to this rule. Paul actually quotes a portion of a letter someone in the Corinthian church had written him. So as he gives his answer, we know generally what he's responding to. In this case, it is about marriage. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Monday, March 21st, 2022. 1 Corinthians 7 begins with Paul quoting back to the Corinthians a question that had been referred to him. Now, concerning the matters about which you wrote, writes Paul, who then quotes from their letter, it is well for a man not to touch a woman. Obviously, we still need to make an educated guess about the issues at stake. From the context of this chapter, it seems clear the question concerned the issue of whether everyone, including married persons, should remain or resume a life of celibacy. This may sound strange to our modern ears, but it was a live question in the early days of the church. There was a clear expectation that Jesus would return soon, and everyone in the church would be taken up into heaven. Human history as we know it would come to an end as Christ inaugurated a new age. With such an expectation, matters such as producing children would have taken a back seat to more pressing issues. What seems clear is that there was a disagreement within the Corinthian church about this issue. No surprise there. The Corinthians seemed divided over a number of issues. Why not add marriage and celibacy into the mix? What follows is Paul at his best, trying to balance what you might think of as competing goods without claiming a divine mandate for what he says. Throughout this chapter, he clearly has a personal preference for celibacy and singleness, yet Paul also has a clear lock on the realities of human life. He allows that not everyone is suited for a life of celibacy, of sexual abstinence. In one of his more colorful passages, he says, "To the unmarried and the widows, I say that it is well for them to remain unmarried as I am. But if they are not practicing self-control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to be aflame with passion." I'm reminded of one of my seminary professors who was one of the oldest members of the faculty when I was there. He was actually retired, but had returned for a year to fill in during someone's sabbatical year. He himself had been a student at the seminary many years before, back when practically all seminarians were young men right out of college. Union Seminary in Richmond at that time had a rule prohibiting students from being married. But this professor changed all that. When, as a student, the faculty refused to allow him to marry before he graduated, he appealed their decision by quoting them this very passage from 1 Corinthians. And it worked. The faculty reversed itself, approved his marriage while still a student, opening the way for other students to marry before or during seminary. Paul's point in this is very simple. Often, people who are unmarried burn with sexual passion, which becomes quite a distraction. Better to allow people to marry than to force people to suffer the flames of unfulfilled desire. He continues with this line of advice at considerable length, addressing a variety of possible situations facing those in the church. Christians whose spouses were non-believers, unmarried persons, widows, and so forth. What Paul is really after is a life as free from worldly distractions as possible, so that members of the church could be about the business of preparing for the imminent return of Christ. We live in a very different time. While we do expect the return of Christ, we do not most of us, think of it as something imminent. We have lives to live, even as we await Christ's return. Marrying, bearing children, caring for families, these we now consider to be part of our Christian walk. It is, as I say, a very different time and a very different set of circumstances from those that Paul assumed. If there is anything enduring for us in this chapter, it is that there is a lot in life that we Christians face that, while our faith may inform our practice, there is wide latitude in the ways we may approach these things. Over and over again, Paul says he gives the Corinthians this advice not as a command or based on a specific revelation from God, but simply as the best wisdom he can summon. Sometimes that's what it all boils down to, though. Bringing to bear on our daily living the best wisdom we can summon, absent any specific guidance from Scripture. Tomorrow, Paul addresses another issue that will seem foreign to us: eating meat sacrificed to idols. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.